So the Tecno Spark 90. This phone is a budget segment smartphone, and as far as the dollar price are going up, this phone's price has also gone up. Like this phone has to be launched with the price tag of 10,000 TK, which is not the reality. It's now at 15,000 TKs, which will convert to something like this, you can see. So this phone is not made for that price tag, but as far as the dollar price are higher, this phone has to be sold with that price. Now currently this phone is now in pre-book, so currently you cannot just go and purchase this phone. You have to pre-book for its arrival, and people who are pre-booking this phone will get a free backpack from Tecno, which really looks good. And our sponsor Mars2 is taking pre-book for this Tecno Spark T, so you can visit Mars2 for pre-booking this phone. Now for the price tag this thing has featured a high refresh display. The display is a 90Hz display, which is not very common in this price tag, so that's a bonus thing for this. Before we start our video, let's give a quick shout out to our today's sponsor, Mars2. Mars2 is a group of smartphone shops located at the 3rd floor of Satarakan complex in Kumilla. No matter which smartphone you need, they have all of the brands covered. You can buy your desired smartphone from them at a fair price. Details about them are in the description below. First, let's talk about the design and build quality. Like most of the people are going to like this design. I am kind of liking this design, but I'm not very impressed with the design of this phone. Now everything is made out of plastic. The frame and back is made out of plastic, but there is a glossy finish on the back. You can see this is really very glossy, and the glossy finish comes with its own cost. We'll be talking about that later. Now the side rails of this phone are flat, which is becoming standard for today's smartphones. Like they're all copying Apple. But this thing is comfortable to hold on the hand, and the plastic materials is kind of soft. The phone feels sturdy on hand, but I have found some serious flaws on the back panel. Like if you press it, it's kind of hits something on the bottom with like the battery or something like that. Like in the middle, if you press it, you will feel that slight gap between the internal component and the back panel. So that's a demerits for this build quality. Now on the bottom we have the dear headphone jack, the microphone, USB-C, and a bottom speaker. Like now this thing doesn't feature a stereo speaker. The bottom speaker is the only way to go, and which kind of sound decentish, I'll say. On the right side we have the power button in which the fingerprint is embedded, and on the top of that we have 2 volume rockers for plus and minus, so that's a nice design touch. On the top we have nothing, and on the left we have a SIM tray, which is a triple slot. You can use 2 4G SIM cards with an SD card, so that's a bonus thing, and no complaints about the slots. Good job Tecno. Now as far as we are talking about the back panel, there is 2 text you can see. On the top we have the Tecno Spark written here, and on the bottom stop at nothing. This is their motto, kind of, I guess. Like as far as we mentioned, the back panel has a glossy finish, and you can mirror finish. You can use it as a mirror. You can see your face, literally see your face like that. Nice. But the cost is that this is a fingerprint magnet. Like every touch on this back panel is clearly visible, and we have been cleaning this thing with microfiber cloths, and we couldn't get rid of these fingerprints out of it. So that's a demerit for the design of this phone. Now we have 2 camera modules. On the top we have the main camera sensor, which is a 13 megapixel camera, and on the bottom circle we have 2 cameras. I really don't know what they do, because I didn't find any function of these 2 cameras on the camera, and they're useless, obviously. Okay, we just get to know that one is the 2 megapixel depth sensor, and another is the QVGA, whatever they are calling it, the AI camera. I don't know what it does. These are all just gimmicky features. Like none of them are useful. If they slot a ultra wide camera, that would be very good for this price segment. Like most of the company don't offer any ultra wide camera in this price segment. So let's come to the display. So the display is a 720p 90Hz LCD display, and it has a V notch on the top, which kind of looks good, I guess. I really want to appreciate a 2022 smartphone with a V notch on top, so that's a bummer for me. Under the hood, this thing packs up a Helio G37 chipset, which is a 12nm thread, so that's not a very good thing, because it shows some lags and stutter in the UI while cruising through different apps and stuff, so that's a bummer. And I have seen some mistouching issues on this phone, like when you are closing the apps by yourself, and that times it has some mistouch issues regularly. So I guess that's a software bug. It can be fixable with software update, but I don't know is it going to get any software updates or not. But out of the box, this thing comes with Android 12 with iOS 8.6. Like this is the Tecno's custom UI, and when you open this phone for the first time, you'll find a lot of bloatwares inside it, and I guess they're going to push some ads also throughout the UI. So that's a negative thing for this thing. but the entire user experience is just decent. I would say it's just good for this price segment, but not so impressive or extraordinary. Now, while cruising through this smartphone, I found a lot of gimmicky features inside this. Like this thing has a 360 flashlight. Can you just imagine? Like this thing actually have two flashlights on the top of this display, like here and here, and you can actually enable this thing while you are turning on the flashlight. You can choose either backlight on the front light, or you can choose a 360 light, which actually enables two of the front light and the back flashlight all together. So the front flashlight can be handy if you are taking selfies at the night time. That time this thing really helps, I would say. We have seen smartphone like Vivo V23, which also had this kind of flashlight, I guess, if I'm not wrong. Now let's talk about the camera. There is a lot of room for disappointment for these cameras. The system is not that great, and the images coming out of it just not to the level. Let's have a look at the image samples and the video samples coming out of this smartphone. The images coming out of this Tecno Spark 90 is good enough for this price segment, but the dynamic range and the colors are not that great. The colors are a little bit washed out, and the dynamic range isn't that great. It can't handle the highlights properly, and it causes issues in the darker or shadow areas also. Now this phone can record videos up to 1080p at 30 fps, and it can also record 720p videos, which is not expected, however, but this is the offering from them. Now the maximum resolution for the video recording on this phone is 1080p, and as you might see, there is almost no stabilization on the phone, so you can't expect smoother videos out of this. The footage is gonna be shaky. And there is a gimmicky feature which is called the bokeh video mode, and if you click on that, it will switch back to 720p. So you can only record the bokeh videos only at 720p, and the background blur is not that consistent, and that is really not usable. Take a look example at that. The bokeh videos is actually an entirely gimmicky feature. It actually can't help you to gain something, and it can also record slow-mo videos. We have performed some benchmark testing on this phone, and this is the results coming out of it. Now, what is my final verdict about this phone? Like the Tecno Spark 90 is kind of good offering, but the cameras are not that impressive. The performance is not up to the mark, but in this price segment, this is kind of considerable. The fingerprint here is really very fast and responsive. I would like to give a thumbs up for that. And in this price segment, no other company is offering high refresh rate display. So if you're into that, you can consider this smartphone. Like this thing has 90 Hz refresh rate. And talking about the refresh rate, you can choose the 90 Hz or the standard 60 Hz. And there's also something called adaptive refresh rate, but I didn't find anything useful like that, because if you're going into some app, this thing switch back to 60 Hz, and throughout the UI, this thing keeps 90 Hz if you choose the adaptive refresh rate. So that's not very impressive, and it never goes down when you're idle. So that's a gimmicky feature inside the settings app. In terms of battery, this thing packs up a 5000 mAh battery, and as far as the chipset and everything goes, this thing can run you about 2 days or more with a single charge. But the bummer is that 10-watt charger which comes inside the box. This thing is going to take a really long time to charge that 5000 mAh battery inside it, so that's a bummer. So this is all about the Tecno Spark 90. Decision is up to you. I'm not going to give any opinion, but I am kinda not liking this smartphone that much. So that's all. See you soon with some interesting videos. Till then, stay good, keep good, and keep doing incredible things. And yes, of course, keep watching Incredible Week.